Everyone knows Rick Harrison as the smart and successful star of Pawn Stars. He comes across as someone who has it all figured out. A man with a quick mind, a sharp tongue, and a love for rare items. Fans love how he handles tough customers and always seems to know the true value of everything that comes into his shop. But what if I told you that the Rick Harrison you see on TV is not the full story? What if there is a side to Rick's past that is far from perfect, filled with struggles and hard times that most people have never heard about? Stay with me, because what you are about to discover will change how you look at him forever. Rick did not always live a life of fame and success. In fact, his early years were full of problems and pain. When Rick was very young, he suffered from serious health issues. He had epilepsy, a condition that caused him to have seizures. Imagine being a little kid, not knowing when your body would suddenly betray you. It made Rick's childhood very difficult. He spent a lot of time at home, unable to enjoy life like other children. Instead of running around outside or playing with friends, Rick stayed indoors feeling isolated and different. Because he spent so much time alone, Rick developed a love for reading. He read anything he could find, especially books about business and history. This was a blessing in disguise, giving him the knowledge and passion that would later make him a successful businessman. But at that time, Rick was just a sick, lonely boy trying to find some escape from his reality. His family struggled financially too. His father, Richard Harrison, had to move the family around many times, always trying to find better opportunities. Stability was rare. They even lived in a trailer for some time. Life was tough, and every day was a new challenge. As Rick grew older, things didn't get much easier. He dropped out of high school at a young age. Not because he was lazy or didn't care, but because he wanted to start making money. He began buying and selling fake Gucci bags, trying to hustle his way out of poverty. Can you imagine a teenage Rick Harrison on the streets, trying to survive, carrying the weight of his family's struggles on his shoulders? This was not the life anyone would expect for someone who would later become a famous TV star. When Rick's family finally opened the gold and silver pawn shop in Las Vegas, it wasn't an instant success. They faced years of financial hardship. Some days, they barely made enough to pay the bills. Rick spent long hours in the shop working day and night. It took years before things finally started looking up. Even then, Rick's personal life was full of ups and downs. He got married young, but the marriage didn't last. Divorce, heartbreak, and the stress of raising children while managing a struggling business were huge burdens on him. Life was far from the glamorous image that Pawn Stars would later show. People often think that fame comes easy, but for Rick Harrison, it was a long, painful journey filled with sacrifices. There were moments when he almost gave up, moments when he wondered if he had made the right choices. Imagine working so hard, sacrificing so much, and still waking up unsure if your dreams would ever come true. That's the real Rick Harrison. A man who fought against illness, poverty, heartbreak, and failure before he ever found success. It wasn't until much later, when Pawn Stars became a hit show, that Rick finally started enjoying the rewards of his hard work. But even then, fame brought new challenges. Being in the public eye meant that every mistake, every failure, every bad decision from his past could come back to haunt him. And according to those who knew him well, like his former partner, not everything about Rick's past is as clean as it seems. There are secrets that still haven't fully come out. Stories about business deals that went wrong, about friendships that ended badly, about times when Rick had to make tough choices that hurt people close to him. What drives a man like Rick Harrison? Is it the love for rare treasures? The thrill of negotiation, or is it something deeper? Maybe it's the pain from his childhood, the memories of being helpless and poor, that pushed him to build an empire no matter the cost. Maybe the shiny smile you see on TV hides a lifetime of scars and regrets. One thing is clear. Rick Harrison's life is not just a simple success story. It is a complicated, messy, and deeply human story of a man who refused to give up, even when life gave him every reason to quit. The Rick Harrison you think you know is only part of the story. And if you listen carefully to those who knew him best, especially his former partners, you will find a much more complicated man than the one you see on the screen. A man who rose from nothing but paid a heavy price along the way. So next time you see Rick confidently making a deal on Pawn Stars, remember behind that confident smile is a lifetime of struggle, sacrifice, and secrets. A lifetime that many would find hard to imagine, and this is just the beginning of what there is to know about Rick Harrison's shocking past. When people see Rick Harrison today, they see success. They see a man who is famous, rich, and confident. They see the flashy lights of Las Vegas, the busy pawn shop, and the TV cameras following him around. but what they don't see is the real journey behind that fame. They don't see the hard times, the failures, the nights full of worry. Rick's early struggles are not just a small part of his story, they are the reason he became who he is today. And once you understand what he went through, you will never look at him the same way again. Rick was born into a family that was anything but rich. His father was in the Navy, moving from place to place, trying to give his family a better life, but better was always just out of reach. The Harrisons were not starving, but they were far from comfortable. Every dollar mattered. Every small mistake could mean a big problem for the family. Growing up in that environment taught Rick one thing very early: if you want something, you have to work for it, and no one is going to hand it to you. Rick, His health also made his life harder. Having epilepsy at a young age was not easy. Imagine being a kid who never knew when the next seizure would hit. Imagine the fear, the embarrassment, the feeling of being different when all you want is to fit in with the other kids. School became a place of fear instead of learning. Rick often missed classes. He felt disconnected from other students. While they played sports and had fun, he stayed home, surrounded by books and dreams bigger than the walls of his small room. But those books became his secret weapon. Rick didn't waste his time. He read everything he could find about history, business, and negotiation. His brain became sharp because he trained it every day without even realizing it. While other kids were busy living a normal life, Rick was unknowingly preparing himself for a future that none of them could have imagined. This lonely boy, stuck inside his home, was building the mind of a businessman. The hard lessons didn't stop there. Rick dropped out of high school at just 16 years old. Many people thought he was making a huge mistake. In a world that tells you education is everything, quitting school can feel like giving up on life itself. But Rick saw things differently. He saw an opportunity to start working, to start earning, to start taking control of his own life instead of waiting for someone else to fix it. He began buying fake designer bags and selling them for a profit. He didn't make millions, but he made enough to taste the feeling of independence. Still, life wasn't easy. Rick watched his father try business after business, some failing, some barely surviving. Nothing came easy. It was a life full of small victories and painful defeats. Rick learned quickly that no one cares about your excuses. The world only cares about results. This lesson became a huge part of his thinking. Failures didn't make him bitter, they made him smarter. Every loss was a lesson. Every struggle was a building block for the man he would become. When Rick and his father finally opened the gold and silver pawn shop, it wasn't the gold mine people imagine today. It was a gamble. Las Vegas was full of pawn shops, and competition was fierce. Some days they barely made enough to pay for the lights. Rick had to work 12, sometimes 14 hours a day just to keep the doors open. Customers came in trying to cheat him, trying to lie, trying to make a fast buck. Rick had to learn how to read people fast. He had to know when someone was desperate, when someone was lying, and when a deal was about to go wrong. These tough lessons built his instincts, turning him into the sharp businessman we see now. There were moments when it seemed like everything would fall apart, times when Rick thought they would lose the shop, times when the bills piled up and the future looked dark. But quitting was never an option. Rick had already lived through hard times. He knew that pain was part of the journey. He knew that most people fail not because they are not smart, but because they give up too soon. Rick refused to give up. He kept pushing, kept fighting, kept believing that better days would come if he just worked hard enough. And then came the biggest turning point. A TV producer visiting Las Vegas saw something special in Rick's pawn shop. He saw real characters, real drama, real life happening in front of him. That meeting led to the creation of Pawn Stars, a show that would change Rick's life forever. But it wasn't luck. It was years and years of struggle, pain, and learning that made Rick ready for that moment. When the spotlight finally found him, he was not just a lucky man. He was a man who had paid for that success with every fiber of his being. Behind the fame, Rick's life is a story of grit, survival, and smart thinking. It's about a boy who turned sickness into knowledge, poverty into motivation, and failure into power. It's about a young man who refused to let the world tell him what he could or could not become. His early struggles were not just obstacles. They were his greatest teachers. They shaped his mind, his heart, and his future. So next time you watch Rick Harrison on TV, making deals and cracking jokes, remember the long, painful road that brought him there. Remember the sick little boy who dreamed bigger than his world allowed. Remember the young hustler who fought for every dollar. Remember the man who built a life not by avoiding struggle but by embracing it. Rick's fame is not just a reward, it is a reminder that behind every successful person is a story full of battles that most people never see. Most people believe they know everything about Rick Harrison. They see him as a smart businessman, a funny TV star, and a family man. But what if there are hidden stories that never made it to the cameras? Stories that were meant to stay secret forever? Recently, someone who was very close to Rick, his former partner, decided it was time to speak out, and what they revealed might make you question everything you thought you knew about Rick Harrison. Imagine spending years by someone's side, building a business, facing ups and downs together, sharing dreams and sometimes even fears. You see the real person behind the public smile. You know their weaknesses, their regrets, and their true character. That is the kind of connection Rick's ex-partner had with him. And now, after years of silence, they have stepped forward with stories that are too shocking to ignore. According to the ex-partner, Rick's rise to fame was not as clean as it appeared. There were moments when desperation led to risky decisions. There were deals made behind closed doors, promises whispered and then forgotten, and battles for power that almost destroyed friendships. In the early days of the pawn shop, money was tight, and the pressure was enormous. Everyone was fighting for survival. And when survival is at stake, people sometimes make choices they later regret. The ex-partner claims that Rick could be ruthless when it came to business. He had a sharp mind but also a cold side. If he believed a decision would benefit him or the shop, he would make it without looking back, even if it meant hurting someone close to him. Loyalty was important to Rick, but only if it didn't get in the way of success. This was not the Rick that fans saw on TV. This was a man who had learned the hard way that in business, emotions could be dangerous. There were also stories about deals that went wrong. Deals that were never talked about publicly. Times when the shop lost thousands of dollars because someone trusted the wrong person. Times when Rick had to clean up the mess quietly to protect the shop's reputation. Not every negotiation ended with a handshake and a smile. Sometimes it ended with anger, threats, and broken relationships. These stories were buried deep, hidden from the fans who only saw the bright side of the pawn world. The ex-partner also spoke about the personal toll the business took on Rick. Fame brought money and attention, but it also brought stress and isolation. Rick became more guarded, trusting fewer people. The walls he built around himself grew higher with each passing year. The man who once dreamed with his team now made most decisions alone. He learned that trusting the wrong person could cost everything, and it made him suspicious of almost everyone, even those who had been with him from the beginning. There were even hints about personal struggles that Rick kept hidden from the public. Struggles with friendships, with family, and even within himself. The pressure to always be the strong, smart leader weighed heavily on him. The ex-partner described moments of sadness, moments when Rick questioned if all the sacrifices were really worth it. Behind the confident image was a man carrying a heavy burden. A man who sometimes longed for the simple life he had left behind. But why did the ex-partner decide to speak now, after all these years? Some say it was out of frustration, others believe it was simply the need to tell the truth. Whatever the reason, their words have opened a door into Rick's life that had been tightly closed for a long time. And once you hear these hidden stories, it becomes impossible to see Rick Harrison the same way again. It is important to remember that Rick is human, just like everyone else. He made mistakes, he hurt people, he fought battles that most fans will never know about. His success was not handed to him on a silver platter. It was built on years of hard choices, sacrifices, and sometimes painful decisions. The story of Rick Harrison is not just about gold and rare treasures. It is about ambition, trust, betrayal, and survival. Hearing these hidden stories makes you wonder how many more secrets are still buried. How many more people have stories to tell about the man behind the pawn counter? How many deals ended badly? How many friendships were lost along the way? And most importantly, what does Rick think when he looks back at the path he took to get here? One thing is clear: success always comes at a price. And for Rick Harrison, that price included more than just hard work. It included broken relationships, tough decisions, and moments of deep regret. His ex-partner's words remind us that behind every shining success, there is often a dark side that few are brave enough to talk about. So the next time you see Rick smiling on TV, closing another big deal, remember that the real story is much bigger, much deeper, and much more complicated than it looks. Behind that confident smile is a man who has seen the best and worst of life, and who carries with him the hidden stories that shaped his journey forever. Rick Harrison's life is often seen as the perfect success story. A man who started with almost nothing and built an empire. People see the fame, the wealth, and the shiny image of pawn stars. They think of him as a businessman who knows exactly what he's doing. But there's much more beneath the surface than the average person realizes. The money, the fame, the success, all of it came at a cost. And the truth is, there are secrets Rick tried to keep hidden from the public eye, secrets that, if revealed, might change the way we look at him forever. When people think of Rick Harrison, they think of a smart businessman who can tell the value of anything. They see the man on TV, negotiating with customers and making deals that seem almost too good to be true. But behind those quick deals and smooth talks, there's a much darker side. Rick has worked hard for everything he has, but that hard work often came with a price. Money and fame don't come without sacrifice, and the price Rick paid might surprise you. It wasn't always easy for Rick to get to where he is today. In fact, there were times when he barely made ends meet. The gold and silver pawn shop didn't start as a huge success. It was just another small shop in a city full of pawn shops. Las Vegas wasn't the glamorous place we see on TV. In the early days it was a struggle. There were days when Rick didn't know if they would be able to keep the shop open. They fought tooth and nail just to make sure they didn't lose everything. That struggle for survival built Rick into the businessman he is today. But it wasn't all good. For every win there were losses, moments of doubt and decisions that Rick wishes he could take back. The first big secret Rick kept was about his relationship with money. People thought he was just another successful businessman who had it all figured out, but the reality is much more complicated. Rick grew up in a family that wasn't rich. His father worked hard, but there were times when they had to struggle to make ends meet. Rick learned the value of money early on, and he also learned the fear of losing it. This fear drove him. It made him cautious, and sometimes even paranoid, about money. He became obsessed with making more, never feeling like he had enough. Even when the pawn shop started bringing in decent income, he kept worrying about the next bill, the next loss, the next failure. The weight of that constant pressure pushed him to work harder, but it also made him make some questionable choices. As Rick gained more fame, the stakes became even higher. With fame came attention. With attention came more money, but also more problems. Suddenly, Rick was in the spotlight. People wanted a piece of him. They wanted to know every detail of his life. They wanted to know how he made his money, what his family was like, and what he did in his free time. The constant pressure of being in the public eye started to wear on him. The man who had once been known for his sharp business sense now found himself constantly worrying about his image. He had to make sure that everything he did, everything he said was perfect. There were moments when he couldn't just be himself. The cameras were always rolling, and people were always watching. And with that came a new set of problems. The fame that Rick worked so hard to achieve also brought along some unwanted attention. With fame came people who wanted to take advantage of him. People who saw him as an opportunity, not a person. Rick's ex-partner once mentioned how many people tried to get into his life, trying to get a piece of the pie. Some of them were old friends, others were strangers, all wanting something. Rick's fears about money and reputation grew even bigger. The fame that should have brought him joy only made him feel more alone. He had to protect himself, protect his business, and protect his image. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't escape the pressure. There were also darker moments that Rick tried to keep hidden. He went through personal struggles that many people don't know about. He had family issues, relationship problems, and times when his business seemed like it might crumble. These personal challenges never made it to the public eye. He kept them hidden because he didn't want to appear weak. He didn't want people to see the man behind the business. He wanted to be seen as a strong, successful figure, someone people could look up to. But the truth is, even the strongest people have weaknesses. Even the richest people have problems that they keep to themselves. Rick's relationship with his family also added another layer of complexity to his life. While his business grew, his personal relationships sometimes suffered. Rick's family was there with him through the tough times, but as his fame grew, things changed. The pressure of the spotlight affected his relationships, especially with those closest to him. His ex-wife and kids lived through the ups and downs of his career, but the public never saw the side of Rick that struggled to balance it all. There were moments when the stress of being in the public eye was too much, and it put a strain on his personal life. Perhaps the biggest secret of all is how Rick's own mind worked. People believed he was always calm and collected, but in private he often doubted himself. The fear of failure was always there, pushing him to work harder. It was a fear that haunted him, a fear that drove him to constantly look for new ways to make money and grow his business. But this fear also led him to take risks. Some of those risks paid off, while others ended in failure. The fear of failure never truly went away. It was a shadow that followed him, always reminding him of how far he had come, and how easily it could all disappear.
Yeah.
So the next time you watch Rick Harrison on Pawn Stars, remember that there's more to his story than what's shown on TV. The fame, the money, the success, all of it came at a price. And the secrets Rick tried to keep hidden from the world are a reminder that even the most successful people are not immune to the struggles of life. The next time you see Rick smiling in front of the camera, ask yourself, what is he really hiding? What has he sacrificed to get here? And most importantly, what is the true cost of fame and success? For years, Rick Harrison's life seemed like a story of success and happiness. People knew him as the businessman who built a pawn empire from the ground up. They saw the family dynamic, the TV show, and the relationships that appeared strong. But behind the scenes, things weren't always as perfect as they looked on TV. There was a breakup, a betrayal, and a lot of secrets that have only recently come to light. The truth about what really happened behind closed doors is far more complicated than anyone could have imagined. When people think of Rick Harrison, they think of a family man. They picture him working with his son Corey and his father Richard, but what they don't see is the hidden tension that simmered underneath. Rick's marriage ended in a breakup that no one expected. The public had no idea that the cracks were forming long before the separation. Rick's ex-wife, who had been a part of his life for many years, stepped out of the picture. But what led to their split? Was it really just a simple case of two people growing apart, or was there more to it than that? According to those close to Rick, the marriage started to fall apart long before it ended. The pressures of business and fame took their toll on their relationship. Being constantly in the public eye meant there was little privacy. Rick's life was always under a microscope. Every decision he made was analyzed, and the stress from his business was enormous. While he worked tirelessly to build his empire, his personal life was quietly crumbling. The balance between family, business, and fame was harder to maintain than it seemed. Rick's ex-wife couldn't handle the pressure anymore. The tension in their relationship reached a breaking point, and eventually they parted ways. But it wasn't just the marriage that fell apart. According to Rick's ex-wife, there were deeper issues at play. Rick was no longer the man she had fallen in love with. The constant pressure to succeed, the obsession with money and fame, and the emotional distance he started to put between himself and his family all played a role in the breakup. She revealed that Rick's focus on the pawn shop and his growing fame changed him. The man who had once been caring, loving, and attentive became distant. As his fame grew, so did his ego. And as that ego grew, so did the problems in their marriage. There were moments when Rick's ex-wife felt like she didn't know him anymore. The man who was once her partner seemed to have changed into someone who cared more about his business than the people who had supported him from the beginning. But the breakup was just the beginning. What happened after the separation was even more shocking. Rick's ex-wife revealed that there was a sense of betrayal. She described how after their split, Rick had made decisions that affected her in ways she hadn't expected. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was also financial. She spoke about how Rick's actions left her feeling like she was left with nothing. There were rumors about money being taken away, promises being broken, and decisions being made that were never discussed. Rick had promised to take care of her, but in the end that promise seemed to be forgotten. For Rick, the breakup wasn't easy either. He was faced with the challenge of rebuilding his life while also dealing with the fallout from the failed marriage. The public scrutiny was intense. His fans had followed his relationship with his ex-wife for years, and suddenly everything seemed to fall apart. The betrayal that both Rick and his ex-wife felt added to the pain of the breakup. Rick was left with the harsh reality that things weren't as simple as they seemed. Behind the cameras in the TV show, there was a man trying to figure out how to move forward with his life, both personally and professionally. In the months that followed the breakup, Rick's life became a series of ups and downs. He tried to keep his personal life out of the public eye, but the damage had already been done. His ex-wife's revelations only made things worse. The public was now aware of the strain in their marriage and the betrayal that had occurred. And as if that wasn't enough, Rick also had to deal with the challenges of running a business that was under constant pressure. The pawn shop continued to grow, but the pressure of running it, combined with his personal struggles, made every day feel like a battle. The betrayal left a scar on Rick's heart that he tried to hide, but it was always there, lingering in the background. The story of Rick's breakup and betrayal is not just about a man and a woman falling out of love. It's about the impact of fame and success on personal relationships. It's about the emotional cost of chasing money, power, and recognition. Rick's ex-wife's decision to speak out shows the hidden struggles that often go unnoticed. Behind the smiles and the TV cameras, there are real people dealing with real problems. The betrayal Rick experienced wasn't just about the end of a marriage. It was about the emotional and personal costs that come with being in the public eye. The end of Rick's marriage also opened up a chapter in his life that many people don't know about. After the separation, Rick began to re-evaluate his life. He had to rebuild himself, both personally and professionally. There were questions about his future, questions about who he wanted to be, and questions about how to fix the broken relationships in his life. In the separation of people's aldom is personal. Rick had always been in control, but now for the first time in years he found himself feeling vulnerable. The journey after the breakup wasn't easy. It was filled with moments of doubt, sadness, and reflection. But it also gave Rick a chance to grow and evolve in ways he never expected. So the next time you see Rick Harrison on TV, remember that the man behind the show is more than just the successful businessman he appears to be. There are layers to his story that go beyond the pawn shop, beyond the deals, and beyond the fame. The breakup, the betrayal, and the challenges he faced after all of this are a reminder that success doesn't always come with happiness. Sometimes the cost of fame and success is far greater than anyone can imagine. And sometimes the real story behind a person's life is the one they try hardest to keep hidden. Rick Harrison's life may seem like a dream to many people. He has built an empire, found fame, and achieved success in ways most people could only imagine. He has a popular TV show, millions of fans, and a business that keeps growing. But behind the scenes, things have not always been as perfect as they appear. What many don't know is that Rick has been fighting battles that have nothing to do with business or fame. These are personal struggles, mental struggles, that he has kept hidden from the public eye. The truth is, while he may appear to have it all together, Rick has faced moments of deep doubt, regret, and inner turmoil that have shaped his life in ways that no one sees. It's easy to look at Rick Harrison and think that he has everything figured out. He's the face of a successful pawn shop, and he has been the star of one of the most popular reality TV shows for years. He's a businessman who seems to know exactly what he's doing at all times. But what many fans don't realize is that Rick's life hasn't always been smooth sailing. There have been times when Rick felt like everything he worked for was slipping away. Times when he questioned if all the money and fame were worth the personal costs. The mental struggles Rick faced were not something he wanted anyone to know about, but they are an important part of his story. The pressures of success weighed heavily on Rick. Being on TV and constantly in the spotlight meant that he couldn't show weakness. He had to be strong, confident, and in control at all times. But behind closed doors, Rick felt the pressure of trying to live up to the public's expectations. It wasn't just about being successful in business, it was about being the man people saw on TV. Every time he made a mistake or failed at something, he felt like he had let people down. This pressure started to take a toll on him mentally. There were moments when Rick felt overwhelmed by the constant scrutiny and the fear of failure. The truth was, even though he had achieved so much, he still struggled with self-doubt. Regrets also played a big role in his mental battles. Looking back at his life, there were many decisions he wished he could change. There were moments when he took risks that didn't pay off, or when he let opportunities slip through his fingers. Some of these regrets were small, but others were much bigger. One of his biggest regrets was the toll his success took on his family. His first marriage ended in a breakup, and Rick admits that he could have done more to save it. He often looks back and wonders if there was something he could have done differently. But at the time, he was so focused on building his business that he didn't realize how much he was sacrificing personally. The regret of not being there for his family when they needed him most still haunts him. Another regret that Rick often thinks about is the way he handled certain business decisions. In the early days of the pawn shop, he made some risky choices that could have destroyed everything he worked for. He knew that he was gambling with his future, but he didn't know how else to keep the shop going. Some of these decisions turned out well, but others left Rick with feelings of regret. He sometimes wonders if he should have taken a different path, but there's no way to go back and change things. The regret of not being able to fix past mistakes is something Rick struggles with privately. But it's not just regrets and pressure that Rick faces. There are also moments of deep loneliness. Despite having a family, a team, and millions of fans, Rick sometimes feels isolated. The fame that he worked so hard to achieve has come with a price. People think they know him because they watch him on TV, but the truth is, Rick often feels like no one truly understands him. He's not just a businessman or a TV personality, he's a person who has fear, doubts, and desires that go beyond his public image. But because of his fame, he often feels like he can't share these feelings with anyone. He has to keep up the appearance of being strong and in control, even when he feels vulnerable inside. Rick also struggles with the idea of trust. As his business grew, so did the number of people who wanted something from him. In the world of fame and fortune, it's hard to know who is genuinely interested in you, and who is just trying to get something from you. Rick became more guarded over the years, and this has made it difficult for him to form deep, trusting relationships. There are times when he feels like he can't trust anyone, even the people closest to him. This fear of betrayal has caused Rick to keep his distance from others, which has only made his feelings of loneliness worse. While Rick has done his best to keep these struggles hidden, they are a big part of who he is. Behind the confident businessman on TV is a man who has fought battles in his mind and heart. He has faced moments when he didn't know if he could keep going. There have been times when he wondered if all the hard work was worth it. And even though he has achieved great success, Rick knows that success doesn't come without its own set of challenges. The mental struggles he faces are a reminder that no one's life is perfect, no matter how it appears on the outside. Despite everything, Rick has learned to cope with these struggles. He knows that success comes with its own pressures, but he has also learned to take things one step at a time. He has found ways to deal with the loneliness, the regret, and the fear of failure. But it's not easy, and it's something he continues to work on every day. For Rick, the battle is never really over. There are moments when he feels at peace, but there are also moments when the weight of his past and present struggles feels overwhelming. He continues to fight, not just for his business, but for his own peace of mind. So the next time you see Rick Harrison on TV, remember that the man you see is not the whole story. Behind the cameras and the pawn shop is a person who has faced mental struggles, regrets, and a sense of loneliness that few people understand. The truth is, Rick's life is much more complicated than the perfect image portrayed on the show. Like everyone else, he has his battles, but it's these battles that make his story all the more real. And while he may not share everything with the world, the struggles he faces are a part of who he is, and they show us that even the most successful people are not immune to the challenges of life.